Thank you, Kyle, for such a wonderful, wonderful introduction. I was like, wow, I was impressed with myself. um, Thank you so much to you, Kyle and Dr. Reader, for having me. It is an honor to be here with everyone today to talk about healed communities. First, start with healed individuals. But before we get into all of that, I wanted to open up with the icebreaker because I know that these conversations can be kind of heavy and can kind of take us into spaces that sometimes we need that can be quite uncomfortable. So I wanted to start out with something kind of fun. And Kyle, if you don't mind, um, unmuting some people. So I need 5 volunteers who are willing to do the icebreaker. I actually would like for everyone to do it who is online. You can actually put it in the chat, your answer. But I would like 5 people to volunteer who would like to do the icebreaker with me. So I'm gonna look in the chat box to see who is willing to participate. See, there's 61 people here. So if you can, 5 people, if you can message in the chat box that you would like to be. Okay, so that is Kathy. So we have Kathy. Let me write your name down. Who else? I just need 4 more.
It looks like we also have Leah.
Leah. Okay. So 3 more. Three more. Okay, Clyde. All right.
And remember, everyone, this is a safe space, so please feel.
Yes, yes. We're gonna have fun. It's not. Yeah. Please trust me on this one. So Kathy, Leah, and Clyde. 2 more. Francis. And 1 more. Val. Okay. Thank you guys for volunteering. Okay. So here is the icebreaker. And this is gonna be interesting for me as well, because I normally do this in person and it's usually like really, really fun and exciting. So I'm gonna see how we can do it virtually, but I'm just gonna go for it. Okay. So for the 5 people, that's fine, Leah. That's absolutely fine. So for the 5 people who volunteered and for everyone else who is on here, I actually would like for you to actually put your answer in the chat box if you don't mind, if you feel led to. So here is the icebreaker. So imagine pre-COVID when, we could be outside and we could, things were happening and, we had events with people and you didn't have to worry about wearing a mask. So just remember to that time, just over 3 months ago. So here is the icebreaker. So imagine we are going to a premiere of a movie, right? It's a red carpet premiere. There's paparazzi, there are fans everywhere. Like this is a huge movie premiere. But the movie is about your life, right? The summary of your life, the summation of your life, the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful, the things that we don't talk about, the summation of your life. I am going to be a reporter. I'm going to ask you, what is the name of this movie and why did you call it that? You guys get it? Do you want me to repeat? You get it? Okay, cool. So normally I would have the audience act like, so Clyde, you don't get it. Okay, so Clyde, we imagine we're at a movie premiere and the movie is about your life. Yes, you get it. Okay, cool. So I want you to tell me the name of the movie. No, it's okay. And why you called it that. So I'm going to act as the reporter. And normally the audience acts as fans and paparazzi. And I normally have you walk down the red carpet, but since we don't have that, we're just going to imagine that you're walking down the red carpet. So who wants to go first? And I'm going to be the excited news reporter, entertainment news reporter. Who would like to go first? Oh, I got to give you time to think about it. I'm sorry. And give you a minute or two to think about the movie title, and then we're gonna get right into it. Nervously, okay. So Leah, you will go first. So Kyle, if we can unmute those 5 individuals, that'd be awesome.
Yep, I'm gonna unmute you also, just bear with us. Thank you guys.
Okay.
Okay, so, oh my God, it is Leah. Oh my gosh, Leah, we've been here all day waiting for you to arrive. Everybody's here. We're so excited. Can you tell us the name of this movie and why did you call it that?
I called it Confident Unconfident.
Ah, Confident Unconfident. Why?
Because I think a lot of my life has been about trying to learn how to stand in my own power. And then I would say that maybe the past 10, 12 years of my life have been committed to trying to pull back from some of that power in kind of an identity way. And so
Got you.
Confidently stepping into who I am and unconfidently holding the power dynamics that entails, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense. Thank you so much for being so brave. Let's get up for Leah. I know we all can't clap at once, but virtually clap for Leah.
Thanks,
Thank
that
you
was
so
scary.
much, Leah. Awesome. Who's next?
Looks like Kathy.
Okay. Oh my gosh. It is Kathy. Oh my gosh. Kathy, are you there? Is she unmuted?
Yep.
Kathy, are you there? You there? Hello?
Kathy's microphone is not working.
Ah, okay. So can we get another person? So who would like to go in her place? Clyde, Francis, or Val? I like that. Val, I'm supposed to interview you. Are you there? Is anybody there? Unmuted? Clyde. Okay, Clyde, so you're unmuted. Can you speak? Oh, Val.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yes. Who's there? Val or Clyde? Both of you?
Can
Go
you
ahead,
hear me?
Val. Go ahead, Val.
Yes.
I go next.
Yeah.
Okay. I sent my chat in. I sent my answers in. I said I would name my movie Seriously because I take my life too seriously at times. I think too much. And sometimes it's hard for me to make a decision.
Got you. Okay. I appreciate your honesty, Val. Thank you so much. Give it up for you.
Thank you.
Awesome. That was awesome. All right, Mr. Clyde,
Yes.
you are next. What is the name of this movie and why did you call it that?
Okay. Well, I call it Sunny, Sonny, because I have a sunny disposition for the most part, but I also too like my life has been like a ray full of sunshine, but also been having like some dark spots here and there. So and I still push forward, even though sometimes it's hard, because the sun can be powerful, but also too it can also be it can be harmful, too at times. So yeah, so that's why I said it. I was kind of nervous, so it's like I'm nervous right now, so I don't know if my point came straight across or not, but
no, you did wonderfully, and thank you so much for being brave enough to open yourself up and share a very vulnerable space about your life. So I appreciate you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, we have one more, then we're gonna get into this. One more and we'll get into it. So Francis, are you there?
All right, Francis, I'm going to allow you to speak.
I don't know if you can hear me. My computer
I
is
can hear
big.
you.
Okay, I'm
I
gonna
hear
say this
you.
real fast before it disappears.
Okay, hold on. Let me go. Let me do my job. Hold up. Oh my God, it's Francis. Oh my God, she's here, everybody. Okay, okay. So Francis, please tell me the name of this movie and why did you call it that?
My movie is called This Journey Called Life.
Okay, and why'd you call it that?
And that is because I view life as a journey. Every experience I have is a journey in this life. The challenges that we're going through, it's a journey. Father used to always say, I'm a journey through life, so I'm just grabbing his thing.
Got you. Thank you so much, Francis. I appreciate you for sharing that. Let's give it up, if we can, virtually for our volunteers. You guys did amazing. I appreciate you guys. Okay, so before we take a deep dive into this, I always share, thank you, Catherine. Everyone did a great job. I always share this quote whenever I get the opportunity to speak in front of an audience of all races, genders, age groups, because it applies to all of us. And that quote is, there's a slot in world history for each and every one of us, either as a world changer or someone who watched the world change. Choose. I'm going to repeat that. There's a slot in world history for each and every one of us, either as a world changer or someone who watched the world change. Choose. It's not what happens to us in life that defines us, but what we choose to make happen that will ultimately be our legacy. I believe that we can not only change our own personal world, but we can change the world as a whole if we choose to do so. I have a tenet that I live by, and whenever I speak in front of audiences, I always share this. And it's I believe it to be true, but people can debate it. But that tenet is that I believe that no one is born ill-equipped. They're just born ill-informed. No one is born ill-equipped. They're just born ill-informed. And it's my job to inform you today that you do have power, that you do have the ability to change the world, that you do have the ability to be a healed individual that will ultimately lead to a healed community, right? So I'm here to inform you that you have everything you need to thrive and be whole for your life. You don't have everything you need for my life or the person next to you's life, but you have everything you need for your journey. And so I'm here to inform you of that. And while we're going into that, I always like to leave participants with feeling three things. I call them the 3 E's: encouraged, empowered, and equipped. Because I believe that that's important, that you be encouraged, that you know that you can do it. I want you to know that you have power, and I want you to know that you have tools, right? And I want to give you all those things, and I want you to feel all those things. 10 years ago, as Kyle so eloquently put it, 10 years ago, I first saw that there was going to be a crisis in the lives of men of color. And I first saw, that it was going to reach this point, this apex of where we would have, it would be a 911, that we would have to start dealing with as men of color, male identified individuals of color, that we would have to start dealing with our emotions and our mental health. And I first saw it, and I knew that it was going to be a problem. And so I wanted to offer a solution. And so what I'm going to share with you guys today are tools that have been proven in my experience in working with the clients that I've worked with. And this is not just for men, this is also for women, from whomever who can apply these tools to their lives. But I'm sharing with you things that have been proven and effective in the lives of men that I've worked with. My goal and my job is to get you on that tarmac, right? So that you can take off into the life that you want, that you can take off into wholeness, that you can take off into mental wellness and self-love and self-like, right? So, and I've achieved that through many avenues, but mainly through the lens of emotional intelligence. So again, as Kyle stated, I like interaction. I don't like to talk the whole time. So if you, I know that this audience is filled with brilliant individuals. And so I would like for someone to volunteer to share what is their definition of emotional intelligence. Don't all speak at once. But if someone can offer up a definition and can share, and we can use that as a working definition for the remainder of this workshop. Self-awareness. That was good, Aisha. What else? What else? Knowing how to respond emotionally. That is excellent. Let's get a couple more. Being in tune with your emotions and others. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's get a couple more. Self-awareness. Absolutely. Ability to hear and understand another's feelings. Hold on, let me make sure I'm reading it. Another's feelings. Emotional intelligence is the tools you use to interpret the world around you with respect to everyone's experiences and personal paradigms. Empathizing with others. Understanding and knowing your own emotions as well as others. You guys are blowing my mind. Okay. Wow. Okay, cool. So you guys have all provided, in some respects, the definition of emotional intelligence. It's EQ. EQ is emotional intelligence. That's the abbreviation for emotional intelligence, EQ. So the definition that I use, and all the definitions that you guys use are absolutely appropriate. The definition that I use for emotional intelligence is the systematic ability of processing and navigating through your emotions to yield a positive result. Also, comma, with another person. So also helping another person, being able to identify the emotions that they're experiencing and helping them to navigate through that as well to yield a positive result. One of the things that you guys kept saying over and over again was self-awareness, right? That's one of the biggest benefits of emotional intelligence is the self-awareness component, right? Being able to be present and understanding how you're showing up in the space emotionally, right? That's great. But how are we going to correlate that with the talk of anti-Blackness and racism, right? I recently did an interview on Fox, and they asked me, they said, Purvis, how are persons of color able to navigate through this space, through this time that we're living in currently? And one of the things that I wanted to point out to everyone is that as a person of color, the grief that we're experiencing, all of us are experiencing grief due to COVID, due to loss of work, loss of jobs, for us, the traumatic experience of seeing the racism, police brutality, all those things that are happening, right? But for persons of color, our grief has become quite what is known as complicated grief, right? Because you have to understand that if you look at it, I had a presentation, but my computer messed up and it crashed. So I had this really nice presentation so you can see what I'm trying to illustrate. But just imagine that you have a circle, right? That's us, that's a human being. Then the other circle is COVID, right? And then the circle around it is the racism. So you have to think that our grief and trauma is layered, right? Because with COVID, persons of color are more than likely to be the essential workers. And we are the ones that are disproportionately have been affected by this disease, right? This virus. And then add the lens of systemic racism that's been plaguing us since we've come to this country, right? So that is a layer, and is now more emphasized, it's more amplified due to videos, right? Camera phones. So it's become quite heightened for us. So, but it's my belief that although those things are happening to us, right? I believe that life also happens from us. And National Urban League recently did a survey, and they asked young people, they said, what are you most afraid of, COVID or police brutality? 98% of them said police brutality, right? So that is alarming, right? So we're understanding that we're in a crazy, crazy, crazy space. But it's my belief that as persons of color, as individuals, as human beings, the thing that we can control or have the most power over is us, right? So my response to that is yes, we are being brutalized as persons of color in this anti-Blackness culture. We are being brutalized. We are being victimized, but I don't see us as victims. I see us as powerful, and I see us that we have the ability to make life happen from us. And so how do we make life happen from us? We have to deal with our own personal trauma, right? How do we collectively heal and really transform and change the world? It begins with us being healed individuals, right? And so I have this thing, what I call transcendent trauma. And that's trauma that happens to us as just being human beings. It has nothing to do with us being Black or male, identified female, religion, all those things. It's just something that happens. Every human being has challenges and things that happen to them just because they're human beings, right? And so that is a space that I want to operate from. So in my own personal narrative, in my own personal journey, my transcendent trauma was that I was molested as a child and I had to work through that. I was bullied as a child. I was emasculated. I dealt with depression and suicide ideation. And I had a father who died of a heroin overdose, right? Who was a functioning drug addict for most of my life. And so that was the transcendent trauma. That wasn't because of where I grew up. It was just something that happened to me, right? And so how did I become the person that heals and helps men to heal and helps people to heal and get them towards a space of thriving? Is that I had to deal with my transcendent trauma, right? And one of the things that I used to deal with and heal through and work through was emotional intelligence. And so the one thing that you guys kept saying was the aspect of self-awareness. How many of you would you say that you're really self-aware? If you could put it in chat, how many of you guys really believe that you're actually self-aware? Kind of. About 90% are to an extent. Right. Right. Thanks to therapy, yes. Thank you guys. I appreciate you guys responding. I appreciate all of you responding. But awareness of others, depending upon situation, working through becoming more self-aware, I think relatively, definitely trying to be. Okay. So one of the biggest, always working on it. Absolutely, as am I. I think one of the biggest benefits for me in working. Oh, well, thank you, Melody. I appreciate you. Thank you for showing up. So let me backtrack a little bit. I kind of skipped over something. I just saw my notes. I skipped over something. What I believe has happened to us culturally, especially for people of color, is that the plasticity of our brains, right, has changed. So one of the things, our parents and our grandparents, the plasticity of their brains was conditioned to just survive, right, and make ends meet. And pretty much they were all uniform in that thought, right? Obviously, there were African Americans who were successful during that time, but for the most part, collectively, we were all kind of on the same page of just surviving, right, and just making ends meet. So whatever transcendent trauma we had to deal with, we suppressed it, and during that time, that was considered strong and having strength, right? But over time, as African Americans, as persons of color, had more opportunities and things started to open up for us, and we were making money, we have a seat at the table, we're thriving. our capacity to suppress has become weakened, right? And the reason why I say that is I look at the suicide rates in African Americans. The fastest growing suicide rate is in young boys between the age of 5 and 12. The depression rates in young women are alarming. The depression rates in men, the anxiety rates in all demographics of African Americans are alarming. So that's what that data has shown me, that our ability to suppress has become weakened, and now we're at a space where we have to deal with our transcendent trauma or deal with our issues, right? And so with that understanding, it's a 911, and many people, the challenge is that we don't know how to begin to deal with our transcendent trauma. We don't understand how that trauma, unprocessed trauma, is just like energy. It doesn't die, it just transforms and shows up in ways that we never intended it to. It shows up in unexpected ways. So now we have to deal with our transcendent trauma and know how to navigate through them, and know how to navigate through it, right? So through emotional intelligence, that process of being able to identify emotions, the ability to be aware of emotions and how to address them and deal with them, has been so vital in my success and in the lives of people that I personally coached and I work with. So one of the things that I want us to really, and I'm going to go into the steps and stages in a few. But before I do that, does anyone have any questions? Are you following? Are you getting what I'm saying? Do you have any questions? Please share in the chat if you have any questions, or if you're following, if you're getting what I'm saying. So I'm following. Okay. Awesome. And I want you to think about, I want everyone to think about some transcendent trauma that's in your own personal life, right? Thank you guys. Thank you. So as it relates to emotional intelligence and processing and navigating through our emotions, one of the things that I found in my journey in the lives of men that I work with is that many of us, we have a very limited emotional lexicon, right? And what I've discovered through studying clinical psychology, through doing this work for 10 years and working with people from all walks of life, I've discovered that our healing oftentimes is in our words. If you go to therapy, I'm sure some of you, someone said that they go to therapy. So when you are seeing a therapist or you're seeing a life coach, the space between practitioner and patient is known as the intersubjective field, right? And that's pretty much where the transformation is taking space. So words are very, very important, right? I know that we diminish words, but words are extremely powerful. I believe that words are spirits, and I believe that words can create worlds, right? I believe that words can heal, and they could crush, right? So our healing in the language that we're saying in this process of getting through our transcendent trauma is imperative, right? And just a fun fact for you guys, they say on average that women speak 30,000 words a day, and on average, they say men speak 30,000 words a day. So there is a 20,000 word gap in communication, right? So my job is, in working with male identified individuals, is to get them to increase their vocabulary. And so now I want to do an exercise with you guys that I'm going to set up shortly as it relates to our emotions. What I found in this journey was that in working with a lot of men, I found that men were comfortable in residing in two emotions, right? Can you guess which ones those two emotions are? Can somebody put up? Yes. Yes, that's one. And there's another one. Horny. No. No. Let's see if somebody gets it. So anger is definitely one. Um, aggression, I would kind of group with anger. There's one. It starts with an I. I'll give you a hint. It starts with an I. Okay, I'm gonna let one. Oh, somebody said it. Somebody said it. Somebody said it. Who said it? Jessica. Jessica, you got it right. Indifference. Indifference. So let's unpack anger, right? So anger oftentimes is the secondary emotion, right? Who can tell me what you believe the primary emotion is? Yes. Fear, depression, fear, insecurity. Those are good. And oftentimes fear can. Yes, Jennifer, absolutely. Hurt. Hurt is the primary emotion we often feel when we are exhibiting anger, right? So I'm going to take it a step further. Underneath the hurt is another experience or emotion, right? So there's sub emotions. So underneath the hurt is disappointment, right? And then underneath the disappointment is an expectation that wasn't met. So in this space of self-awareness, in this space of dealing with our emotions, we have to understand that oftentimes the emotions that we're experiencing, there is a pathology to it, right? So for instance, I had a young man who I did a staff training for an organization in Washington, D.C. And I was sharing my life, my narrative, and he was known to be quite angry, right? They told me, they said, this guy, he's a hothead, like just, just forewarning you. So I had the session, I'm explaining my life narrative, talked about the molestation, father down heroin overdose. And he's like, and you could feel the heat coming off of him. He's like angry about something. Then all of a sudden, he starts to cry. And I asked him, I said, are you okay? What's going on? And he almost collapsed. He said he was crying because he was mourning the loss of his mother who died when he was 5. And he was angry at her because he expected her to be there for him. And he felt that his mother abandoned him. And so in that moment, he was able to trace the pathology of the source of his anger. He was hurt. He was disappointed that his mother didn't meet his expectation of being a mother to him, to live. Kevin, I would say indifference, meaning that you are not feeling anything, like numb, but it's still a feeling because it's still the absence. It's like people say black is not a color, but it is a color. It's the absence of color, but it's still a color. So indifference is kind of like a space where you choose not to access emotions. You choose to suppress them. You choose to not deal with emotions. But are you guys following the story, what I just shared? So the pathology of this young man's anger, who was 32 at the time, the pathology of it was an expectation that he had that wasn't met. So part of dealing with our transcendent trauma is getting down to the space of really unpacking the expectation that we had. Thank you, Leah. I appreciate that. So our challenge is to really And the reason why I call this time, I know that it's been a challenging time for all of us, right? But I've called this space a time of self-discovery, because in this time of COVID, we are kind of forced to kind of deal with ourselves and take an inward look, have that inward dialogue with ourselves to really ask ourselves these deep questions. He didn't have control of expectation, but he nonetheless had an expectation. It's not about, hold on, let me make sure I read your comment fully. Where'd it go? Can you put it back up? I don't see it. I'm sorry. Val, can you put your comment back up?
Purvis, the question was, he had no control over that expectation. It was out of his hands.
Yes, but nonetheless, I think my response to that is that he still had an expectation. And I think if we're honest, many of us have expectations. Whether they are realistic or unrealistic, that's up for debate. But I think a lot of us have expectations. And I think it's about, the journey is about managing those expectations. Like for instance, I have a basic expectation to be treated with respect and dignity. That expectation is out of my control, but it's still an expectation that I have. And is that making sense, Val? Cool. So just that one example of anger, I want, and I actually would like people to, if you're comfortable, I would actually like for us to speak to a couple of people. What is your relationship to anger, and how does it show up in your life? How has it affected your life, if at all? And yeah, let's talk about that. Does anybody feel comfortable sharing, even whether in the chat box or on actually online? Our own anger. What is your relationship to anger? Let's see. Let's see. Class says it shows when I hold stuff in until it becomes overwhelming. Being silent at the time, I could have used my voice. I don't feel entitled to anger. Well, Pascal, I'm asking, what is your relationship? You seems to lose out to the other major one, indifference. Oh, I don't prefer getting angry because I seem to lose myself. I can share. Okay, Catherine wants to share. Is that okay, Kyle?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yes. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I just wanted to share that in the past, anger for me was more like an attack. So I felt like I didn't like the feeling. I would hide from it. I would go into a dark place and try to muffle it. So I would placate and try to appease those that were either angry at me. I had to learn to kind of sit in that moment and feel it and be okay and accept the fact that it's okay for me to be angry, especially if I'm disrespected or
absolutely
I'm not treated fairly. So it's taken, I would say, a lifetime to reach a point where if I'm in that moment, I can still stand strong and fast to face it.
Yes.
And be able to accept whether they agree or not. My anger is my anger and it's okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Catherine, you actually just touched on something that I was actually going to explore. So you're cheating a little bit. But one of the things I wanted to share with people is that, anger is two things. It can be constructive or destructive, depending upon how we channel it and manage it. You get what I'm saying? So when Rosa Parks got angry, and said, I'm not giving up my seat, that was constructive, right? Because she made a decision that she was going to stand for herself and stand up for right, obviously not knowing at the time it would turn into what it was going to turn into, but she made a constructive decision to use her anger. Now, typically the problem is that many of us, our anger leads to what? Destruction. And so that is the challenge. So with our anger, right, as it relates to this lens of anti-Blackness, this lens of systemic racism, right, our anger needs to be constructive rather than destructive. I was very angry, destructive child because I felt like I wasn't heard or listened to, but now I process my emotion. I allow myself to be angry when necessary. I think it is okay to be angry at times when you can learn from it. Absolutely. All emotions are valid. There is not one emotion that isn't valid, otherwise you wouldn't have it. And that is the space as persons of color, we are entitled and allowed to experience every emotion. We are entitled to honor our humanity. That is part of being a human being, is to experience emotions. Anger for me makes me to an uncomfortable place, and I isolate myself to deal with it. Anger is a defense mechanism. I feel my anger is more understood or accepted than my actual disappointment or fear. It made me feel strong rather than vulnerable. I try to be the peacemaker most of the time. Growing up, my stepfather was abusive. I was determined to not lose control like he did, but my anger I pushed down deep until when it erupts, people are like, whoa. But then I feel better. I try not to act or speak in anger because I know I cannot undo my behavior or what I said. Absolutely. Thank you so first of all, guys, I just want to thank you for being so vulnerable to share what you shared in the chat. It takes bravery. And, you know, again, as Cal said, this is a safe space. I applaud you, right? I celebrate you. Your input on anger is absolutely important. But I also want you to understand is that when some people shut down and people are hurt differently depending upon how they are seen. Absolutely. 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 And one of the things that I think is important is I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but also too, in the space of mental health, in the space of wellness, right? There's a disparity in how persons of color are incorporated into it. You know, psychology is not an exact science. And typical things that are different in African Americans than any other demographic. For instance, young men of color demonstrate depression different than any other demographic. And so we have to understand, to Leah's point, that things look different in each person, but it takes us to be aware enough to engage in empathy to try to see it in other people. And some of us, we are told to not show any emotion at all. Exactly. Justin, that's what I do. I try to create spaces where male identified individuals can express their emotions, where they can understand that it's okay, that they understand that it makes you completely masculine to address and to deal with your emotions. Yes, Deborah. So a quick example from my own personal narrative. I used to work in the music industry many moons ago, and my first job I had here in New York City, I was 22 years old, and the day before, I worked at a music publisher. The day before, two white women got into it, and they were cursing each other. They were throwing stuff at each other, and nothing happened to them. My coworker, she was now they acknowledge she was harassing me. She was a white woman. She said something to me, and I got upset and I was angry. I didn't curse, I didn't threaten her, I didn't do anything, but I was escorted out of the building. And that experience taught me that my passion, that my anger is threatening. And so I understood in that moment at 22 years old that there's a disparity in how I'm able to experience my humanity. And so one of the things is I have to challenge that and I have to fight through that. And that's what I teach men to do. It's okay to be impassioned. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be whatever it is you're feeling in the moment, because like Catherine said, once you experience the emotion, it does subside. And I think that's the problem the challenge that we have in dealing with this space of our emotions, is that we are afraid of them. Because we suppress them and push them away, we don't understand that we need to experience them in order to move on. Is that making sense, everybody? You need to experience the emotion in order for it to subside, in order for it to go. I think it's hard for many of us to trust that a space can be really safe. How do you create that? So Kevin, one of the people ask me all the time, Purvis, how are you so successful in working with people from all walks of life? And my answer is simple. I believe that transparent leaders create environments for sharing. I am in no better shape than you, Kevin. I'm on the journey just like you. I may have learned some things. I may have some tools that I implement that help me, but I am no further along than you. And so I believe tangibility is necessary in creating these spaces. I believe that people need to know that you've gone through, that you've hurt, that you can identify with what they're experiencing. And so for me, I'm very much in tune with the broken spaces and the broken places in my life. And I think that is the reason why people trust me so easily, because I've been through hell. And what I've shared with you guys is just scratches the surface of the things that I've experienced. But those things that I did share with you, many people can identify with. And so that's what creates a connection. Transparency builds a bridge. In DBT all the time. Exactly. So transparency creates an environment for sharing. So we went off. Okay, so let me, I appreciate you guys chiming in. I really do. More questions, keep them coming. So the anger, so going back to anger, remember that anger can be constructive or destructive, right? So anger is not in itself is not a bad emotion, but understanding why you're angry, understanding the pathology of the anger is necessary. And it takes the emotional intelligence to be able to process it, to be able to come up with a constructive conclusion rather than a destructive conclusion. Does that make sense? Processing it doesn't mean that the emotion changes. It means that your response is different than you reacting. So there's a difference. We want to always respond to our emotions rather than react. When you go to the doctor, when you go to the hospital and they're giving you medicine to treat you, they're looking for a response. They're not looking for a reaction. So we want to be able to respond. That's what emotional intelligence does. When we are able to process, to identify and name our emotions, we're able to respond accordingly, right? As Catherine shared earlier. So with that being said, so we're going to do an exercise. I want you, if you have paper, I want you to write down these 3 emotions. I call them kind of like the main emotion food groups. So I want you to write down mad, sad, and happy. I would like for you guys to write down as many synonyms, emotional synonyms, as you can for each of them. Are you guys clear on what I'm asking? So I'm going to give you guys like maybe 2-3 minutes. And if you have questions in the interim while you're writing it down, please share them. So you're gonna have mad, and then you're gonna write down some emotional synonyms of that word. Then you're gonna have sad. You're gonna write down some emotional synonyms of that word, and then happy. So I'm gonna set my timer and give you guys 2 minutes. And if you have any questions, please ask. That's what we're here for. No question is a dumb question. I mean, I'm giving you my lens, the perspective in which I work from, the framework in which I work from. But you know, I've worked with everyone. So if you can apply this to your life, then by all means, take it. Does that answer your question? All right, guys, we have 30 more seconds. Oh, y'all skipping ahead. Nikki's on it. Okay. Okay, so we got 5 more seconds, guys. And actually, I actually want you guys to speak. I want you to share. They stole my answers. No, listen, all answers are good. If there's anyone who would like to share, please let Kyle know and he'll unmute you. I would like to hear your answers for all 3, if you don't mind.
Deborah, you are now able to speak.
Thank you. For mad, I have angry, irate, pissed, hot, crazed, frenzy, demented. For sad, I have blue, depressed, small, sorry, heartbroken. For happy, I have glad, content, joyous, smiling, elated.
Very good. Very, very good. That's awesome. Who else?
Emily, you are now able to speak.
Hi.
Hi, Emily.
So for mad, I had angry, frustrated, irritated, enraged, and upset.
Mm-hmm.
For sad, I had depressed, down, gloomy, and I also had upset for sad.
Got you.
And then for happy, I had content, light, jubilant, and joy.
Ooh. So can I tell you, Emily, jubilant is always my favorite one when I do this exercise with people, and no one ever puts that up. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
For using that one. I love that. Okay, let's do one more. Let's hear from Kevin. Kevin, I would love to hear from you.
Kevin, if you bear with me, I'm going to allow you to speak. You are now able to talk.
Kevin, you there? He said no, thank you. So Kyle, he said no, thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Kevin.
So I wanted you to do this exercise because I want you to understand that there are so many more. Let me tell you something. In working with men for years, I've heard this phrase over and over again, man, I feel a ways, or I'm mad tight, or or you could say I'm pissed, right? That may be the extent. But I wanted to do this exercise because I want you to understand that there are more emotions than just being pissed or tight or I feel a ways. The reason why it's important for us to be able to identify and name the emotions that we're experiencing is because it helps us to give you what you need. So for instance, if you're working with me as your coach and you say, I feel a ways, I don't know what to do with that. But if you can say that I feel frustrated, or if I feel overwhelmed, or I feel discombobulated, or whatever it is for you, I can help that. I can help unpack that, right? And so I also want you to understand that emotions are experienced in various degrees and intensities. Yes, absolutely. You guys are incredible. So emotions are experienced in various degrees and intensities. So here's the thing. If you think about anger, right? If you think enraged is probably like a level 9 or 10 rather than perturbed. Perturbed is like maybe a level 4, or like irritated may be like a level 5. The reason why it's important for you to understand and know the emotions that you're experiencing is that I don't want anyone to get to a space of being enraged. To work up, you have to work yourself up to a level 10. If you can stop yourself at being at maybe a level 4, you won't make the poor decision that you will probably make at being enraged. Does that make sense? Yes. So I want you to understand the reason why naming emotions is important. Having an emotional lexicon is important because it helps you to identify and contextualize your experience and where you are currently. Okay, so I'm gonna give you guys, the secret sauce, the things that I share with my clients who are now thriving. I wrote a book. It's called Survival Mode, and this book is what I'm going to share with you guys. Share with you all. It has helped so many men to navigate their spaces and who are now in a space of operating towards wholeness and wellness. I've had white women read this book and share the same result. Marriages have been restored. Men are now in therapy as a result of this book. So I'm going to give you the 4. So it's called Survival Mode. It's taking you from surviving to thriving. So I'm going to give you the 4 A's of thriving, getting you to a space of thriving as an individual, thriving in spite of the transcendent trauma, processing and navigating through the transcendent trauma. So the first A of survival mode is acknowledgement, right? And acknowledgement is very, very important. It's very, very powerful. Is because I think it's important that speaking a thing, yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's important to acknowledgement is awareness, the word that we've shared over and over and over again. Awareness, right? It's an awareness. It's saying that something is there, right? Alcoholics Anonymous is one of the most successful recovery programs in history. Why? Because every meeting, they say, my name is Purvis, and I'm a what? Alcoholic. So they acknowledge. So there's power in acknowledging something. Every breakthrough begins with a question, and it begins with acknowledgement. So acknowledgement is so important. We must acknowledge that we have pain. And here's one thing I also want to interject. This is just a quick tidbit for everyone. And this is not going to sound good, but it's the truth. We have to be comfortable with pain in the process of healing, in the process of thriving, in the process of changing the world. We have to be comfortable with pain. And why do I say that? When you break a leg, right? And the leg starts to heal, and you're going through physical therapy, you're learning to walk again, there's a pain that is associated with it that you just have to embrace. When you're having surgery, there's a pain that comes as you're healing. There's a pain that is associated with it. You have to know that as you're healing, right? As you're healing through the transcendent trauma, as you're healing through the space of trying to be that dynamic individual, there is going to be a pain that comes along with it. And the sooner we can embrace that, the better. Right? So, yes, it's called growing pains, right? It's growing. It's a pain. There's certain trees, in order for the tree to grow, you have to beat the tree. You have to beat it. So the tree has to experience trauma and pain sometimes for it to grow. And so the thing is true for us as we're healing. Sometimes we will experience pain. So that's just a tidbit that I want everyone on this Zoom call to understand and accept as soon as possible. So acknowledgement is the first step. The awareness that something is wrong and something is not working. That is the first step towards healing through the transcendent trauma. Second, which is very, very difficult and very, very painful for many of us, is a second word called acceptance. Acceptance is very challenging for many of us because acceptance can some way seem like we're condoning what has happened. So for me, being molested, accepting that I was molested, somehow in the beginning of it felt like I condoned or I was in agreement with what happened. But that's not what acceptance is. Acceptance is the acknowledgement that it did happen, and just accepting, embracing that it did happen, right? Not that I wanted it to, but that it did happen. Accepting that fact and understanding that although I didn't want it to happen to me, I'm now responsible for what happens from me. Right? And that's a hard pill to swallow, because I don't ever want anyone who I ever come into contact with to remain in a space of victimization. I want you to know, yes, you were victimized, but you're not a victim. So yes, the pain that I experienced, I had to accept it in order for me. The acceptance was the bridge to take me over to the next place. I needed to accept in order to walk to the new place, right? I needed to know that I needed to accept that this happened, but I was responsible for what happens from now on. And that's a hard space, and that's a hard place. And that is one of the most challenging places I have when I'm working with clients as I'm walking them through this process, right? The acceptance component, because it's not a conceding or agreement. It's saying that it did happen, and I have to accept that it happened, right? So acceptance, that's the second A. The third A is articulation, right? Articulation, as I stated earlier, I said that your healing is in your words, right? And one of the things that I teach my male clients is that, especially those who are married, right? Who are married or they're in relationships of all kinds. I said, we have to be intentional with our language. We have to use sensory language, right? Sensory language appeals to the senses. It builds further connection, right? So if you say, if a client of mine says, "Purvis, I'm mad as hell," I understand that, I get it, and that makes sense. But if he were to say, "Purvis, I'm so mad right now, I could literally, the heat off my body could set the house aflame. I set the house ablaze. I'm so fuming right now that if somebody were to touch me, they would burn up. That helps me to understand. That builds the connection. That builds connection. It builds the empathy. It's the bridge. It's a connector. So articulating is so important. It's about the language. It's about, remember, the healings in your words. It's about speaking and acknowledging, accepting everything that's happened. So for me, being emasculated as a man, it was so dehumanizing. I didn't feel like I was even a human being. That experience I had growing up in Lancaster, Texas, it was horrifying in some regards, because it was times where I would be so afraid to go to school that my body would convulse. That's articulating the experience. That just built a connection with you guys. And I've never met you. There's a connection that I just established in just the language that I use. And so articulating what you've experienced is so important. And also the conversation, it's also about the conversation that you have with yourself, as I stated earlier. I believe self-introspection is an inward articulation with self, right? So while you're articulating what has happened, you're also articulating within you as well, right? So that's the third A, articulating. The fourth A is my favorite one, and that is alchemy, right? How do you transform all the pain that you've gone through, all of the experiences, all the pain, all the brokenness, all the tears, all the self-doubt? How do you transform that into something that is greater than you? Because, you know, alchemy is turning lead into gold at the base of it. How do you turn the lead in your life into gold? Yes, I'll type it right here. How do you transform your experiences into something that's greater than you? How did I, who was someone who was brutalized in his masculinity, now I empower men in their masculinity? How did I do that? I went through the process that I walked you guys through. I started, the alchemy for me was, you are also mildly describing both the emotion and physical experience. You are not just labeling that you felt scared, sad, but you also felt in your body. It allows us to see you. Yes, Jennifer. Yes. But it's still sensory. You know what I mean? That's still sensory, because feeling physical is still sensory. It's still one of the senses, touching. Yes. So I'm agreeing with you. So the alchemy component is the transformative. That's the transformation. That's the decision where you say, I am not going to let this thing master me. I'm going to master it. And that is a space. That is a space where your life begins to shift. That's the space that if we are to heal as a community, as Black people, that's the space where we transform, and that's how we start to become really well empowered, especially in 2020. We have to be able to transform, to take that lead, all the stuff that we're experiencing, and turn it into gold. So in this space, this time that we're in, and this is for everyone, how are you going to master the things that have mastered you? How are you going to access the power that you have, that you don't need to get, but you already possess, to use it to transform the monkey places in our lives into gold? And I can't give you the answer to that, but I can tell you that you have the ingredients to make a beautiful cake for you, right? And so those 4 A's are the things that my clients have used that have yielded them great results. I recently had a client in Dubai who his issue was working through the pain of his father, his father not being in his life, and him taking the steps that we just talked about. Now he is a successful entrepreneur. He has repaired the relationship with his father. He has repaired the relationship with his child's mother. And now he's in a place of where he is on the tarmac taking off into the life that he's desired for himself. Now, with that being said, this is a process. And anything we know with ES on ES is forever. It's a continual thing. This is not a one-time thing. Forgiveness, you know, those are, anything with ES on it means that you have to do it more than once. So process, this is not just a one-time thing. This is something that you just have to build and integrate into your life, because, you know, when you work through something, there's always going to be something that shows up to see if you really work through something, right? So if you don't have any challenges, if you don't have any pushback, if you don't have any obstacles, how do you know that you've overcome something, right? So I want you to understand that when it comes to our mental wellness and our emotional health, we have to be on the offense, not the defense. And so with that being said, I want you to know that these 4 A's, as simple as they are extremely effective, but you have to integrate them into your life, and it has to become a part of your new life, it has to become a part of your new narrative. Integrating these things, understanding that everything in your life can be transformed into something greater. We are that powerful as human beings that we can transform even the ugliest things in our lives into something greater. So do you have any questions? We have like 19 minutes left. Do we have any questions so far? And are you guys hearing me? Yes. Right.
You are coming through loud and clear, Purvis. Thank you for all of that. And I want to thank the audience for being so engaging as always. Looks like someone asked for the 3 A's typed in if possible.
I'm writing it right now.
Wonderful. And to our audience members, please feel free to, thank you again for sharing your thoughts and feelings in the chat. And if you have any questions, please just put them in the Q&A box.
I love questions, by the way. Thank you for sharing, Purvis. I would love to hear how you went from articulation to alchemy. I made a decision. My mother used to always say to me, she used to always say, when you want to get off a roller coaster, you'll get off. And I made the decision. I said, I am no longer accepting, I'm no longer believing the lies of what the experiences told me. I'm no longer believing the shame. I'm no longer attaching shame to me as an identity. And so when the moment I said I released shame, that's when I was able to start to really empower myself and start to speak life over myself. And so that moment when I recognized that I had the identity of what I experienced, as it was so pronounced that people would see it before they even saw me. And so once I released the shame of it through therapy, through prayer, through friends, safe spaces and things like that, and through, just surrendering to the fact that I was amazing, right? Because we have to surrender to the fact that we're amazing in order to go from articulation to alchemy. And I think that's the challenge, is that many of us surrender to the negative things all the time. I recognize that if we're surrendering to something negative, then there must be something positive on the other side. And so for me, it was surrendering to the fact that I was amazing. And so once I surrendered to that, and I recognized that I was identifying that my strongest identity was what happened to me, the shame, that moment I let that go was the moment that I was able to start to transform. Yes, Pascal, you should get this book. It's a short read. It's only 84 pages. This is a great book. So Thrival Mode, this is the book I use for my clients. I require all of my clients to read it before we begin sessions. So this is a great book. How do you define forgiveness? There seems to be many ways to define what it is and how it is beneficial. It's interesting that you say that, because I'm in a cycle of forgiveness right now. Forgiveness for me, for Purvis, means that, say for instance, you owe me $1,000. Forgiveness for me means that you no longer owe me $1,000 and we don't ever have to talk about it again. I've let it go. I've let it go. And the benefit, in my experience, for me of forgiveness is I get a piece of myself back. I was holding on to unforgiveness towards a person for so long, and I recognized like in year 2, like there was a piece of me that I just didn't have, Like that person owned a piece of my life because I refused to let it go. So they still held on to me, even though they obviously, I'm speaking metaphorically, but there's a piece of me that I didn't have. I relinquished it to that person. And once I recognized, like, okay, so this is for me. Once I let that person go, I started to feel freer within my being. I started to feel freer within my mind. And also opportunities start to open up. I believe that unforgiveness blocks opportunities. So more things started to open up for me because I had the space for it to be poured into. I believe that unforgiveness has a lot of blockage qualities to it. So that's how I forget forgiveness, and know that it's not a one-time thing. It is something that you do over and over again, because you can think about someone that you can think that you've forgiven somebody, and then you think about something and you can get mad all over again, and then you still make the decision to forgive them. It's a process. It's not a one-time thing. Will you have another training similar to this? I have clients that would benefit from this just as much as I did. The training was amazing, opened up my eyes. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Hi, Emily. Yes. Forgiving and forgetting, no. And I sometimes don't encourage people to forget. Because sometimes forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. Forgiveness means that you no longer owe me. You don't owe me anything. It means I've let it go. Doesn't mean that we're going to be friends again. Doesn't mean that we're going to be acquainted again. That it could be, but the forgetting part, I don't necessarily know. If I'm dealing with a marriage, if I'm dealing with a couple, I would say that forgetting is good, because sometimes if we choose to keep remembering, sometimes we filter any new mistake they make through that experience. And so in that regards, forgetting would be best if you can. And I'm using forgetting very loosely, but making sure that you've completely forgiven the person is more important to me. I do speaking engagements. I do trainings. Kyle, I'm going to provide my email address. He's going to connect me with you guys. So Kyle will connect you with me if you would like to get in touch with me. Your statement. Wow. When do you know that you are healed? That's a great question. I believe that you know when you're healed when that thing no longer does to you what it used to do to you, and know that it's a process. So for instance, like people who used to bully me in school, and I see them all the time, and I don't feel anything. Like I don't feel the when I used to see them, I used to feel it in my body. Now I don't feel anything. I'm able to hold conversations with them, no malice. Like I'm showing up as purpose. When you get to show up as your most authentic self at all times, that's when you know that you've healed, in my opinion. I'm always inspired by people's testimonies without naming them or gendering them. What are some of the most powerful experiences of articulation to alchemy that you have seen in some of your clients? Just recently, I had a client that was a social worker. This person was underpaid and undervalued, and this person was experiencing a lot of self-doubt. And us going through these stages in me being used to help them. Now this person is the director of a national organization in charge of mental health, making way more money and feeling more empowered in ways that they never felt before. And the old them would have never even applied for a position like this. So that's one. Two, working with someone who wanted to be who wanted to be a music manager and was an attorney and dealt with severe low self-esteem. Actually, my very first client dealt with severe low self-esteem. And once we unpacked where that came from and we went through the stages, now this person is a Grammy award-winning executive producer. One person used to work hourly job, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. And now this person is an executive. Within like a year and some change, this person is now an executive at a major company. And also these people are also doing well inwardly as well. So I'm giving you the sellable thing, the career thing, but they're also doing well inwardly. There are two good questions in the Q&A box. Will you be able to share this webinar? Will I be able to share? Kyle, right? This is going to be on YouTube.
Yes, we have been uploading all of our videos for all past series, including this one, and this will be made available shortly after its recording. And also, I just wanted to bring attention to two really good questions in the Q&A box, if I may read them off real quickly.
Yes, yes.
First one, as a clinician, how do you determine how much personal narrative you will share with your clients during the session? How do you set boundaries with how much of your past trauma you share?
That's a good question. So from the lens of being a coach, I have a lot more autonomy than let's say like a clinician per se. I share what needs to be shared at the time. It depends on, because I think a lot of times people have a perception of me like I'm healed, like I'm whole and I don't have any issues and that I've arrived at this place. And I always try to make it very, very clear that I'm on the journey with you. This is just what I've been blessed and gifted to do, right? Otherwise I would be in the same position as you. And I do seek a therapist. So for me, it's like whatever needs to be shared at the time to make that person feel safe and comfortable, I will do it.
Thank you for that. And we have another question. Getting back to the discussion around anger, if we as Black people show our anger, won't we be considered as the angry Black man or woman, which I often hear?
Right. And so my answer to that is, again, anger being constructive or destructive. If that causes you to advocate for yourself, my whole thing is just processing it into a space, because you're not responsible for how people perceive you. You're responsible for how you choose to show up within that space. And so for me, as long as you are okay with you at the end of the day, in terms of that you process it to yield to a space of being constructive and a place that you are responding versus reacting, then you've done what you needed to do. And the rest is not on you.
And thank you for asking that question. And thank you to all the participants once again for being so wonderful, so inquisitive, thoughtful, and gracious. If you have any further questions, please ask them in the Q&A box. But while we're waiting, Purvis, and before, as we come up on time, I just want to ask, do you have any closing thoughts for our viewers?
Yeah, firstly, I just want to thank you, Kyle, for facilitating this, for creating this space, you and Dr. Reeder. I think this conversation was so important. And I also want to thank the audience for allowing me to speak through my lens and just embracing me. And I really appreciate that. I guess my closing words would be, like I said at the beginning, that no one is born ill-equipped, they're just born ill-informed, and that we have everything we need to thrive in this life. And that I don't ever want anyone to feel like they're a victim. I want you to know that you are so much more than that you are empowered to triumph over everything. And so my thing is thriving, and that you deserve to be whole, and that wholeness is possible. So.
Wonderful. Thank you for those really inspiring, uplifting, and ultimately transformative words, because I think as we all dive into work with ourselves and within communities, there's a lot to learn and a lot to grow through. So thank you, Purvis. Thank you for creating such a wonderful space for our audience. I am always really impressed with how our audience holds each other up and holds the speakers up. And I just really was inspired by how everyone interacted today. So thank you everyone for joining us. Once again, please take the brief survey after this webinar is concluded. All videos will be uploaded on YouTube. If you just look up Community Health Training Alliance on YouTube, they are there. Also, Purvis Taylor can be found on Instagram and Facebook if you just look up Purvis Taylor, but I will also be providing the audience with links to his work and his social media. And don't forget to join us this Thursday from 12 to 1:30 for the impact of anti-Blackness in medicine, where we'll be joined by Dr. Faith Peterson, who is the founder of the Philadelphia Birth Equity Project. So once again, thank you, Purvis. Thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you have a good day. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Thank you so much, everyone.
God bless.
Take care.